Hey, I have a secret to tell you. This secret is big, and when I say big, I mean this will change your life forever. No, I'm not messing with you. I am being 100% genuine. You can tell other people about this secret if you want, but there is a good chance they will not believe you. And even if they did believe you, there is a very good chance they will fall into hysteria and lose all meaning in their life. The only reason I'm telling you this is because I know you can take it. Knowing all of this, are you ready for me to tell you this secret? Hello again, people. Today I'm going to take you on a journey through time and space. I'm going to talk about someone who is at the center of meme culture for a very long time. I am, of course, talking about the enigmatic and ambiguous world of Sans.
There's so much to explore. Oh! There's Sam!
We're getting close. Right? Hey, it's Ness.
Hey, it's me, Sans Undertale.
Fight back! Fight back!
Who's got my hat?
Sans is a very mysterious character. He gets serious when the situation doesn't really call for it, and at times he doesn't act until it's far too late. I am mainly referring to Sans' actions within the Genocide Route, or rather his inaction. This route is not just about the player becoming crazy and killing everything in their path, but also the spirit of the first fallen child taking over the body of Frisk to carry out this genocide. Flowey eventually interprets the situation as such.
That's a wonderful idea!
But Sans cannot make heads or tails of what you are. Initially, he assumes that you are human, but based on your featureless expression, he begins to second guess. After spending a minute or so with the protagonist, he soon pieces together what he is actually dealing with. Throughout this run, the actions of Sans are mostly the same. It is the human's refusal to participate which gives Sans all of the information he needs. Sans uses this information to piece together that what is standing in front of him is not human. And whatever this is, it is about to fight his brother, Papyrus. He cannot harm this entity because of his promise to Toriel, so instead he issues a threat. If the player continues down this genocidal path, then they will have a very bad time. The threat is issued, and Sans teleports away. Despite Sans' threats, he doesn't do anything to stop you from killing Papyrus. In fact, Sans takes a massive backseat throughout the events of the Genocide Route. We see Sans disappear in Snowdin, and we will not see him again until we reach the Judgement Hall. Now you probably know why I decided to do the Genocide Route first. We see very little of Sans throughout. The larger reason why I wanted to start with the Genocide Route is the fact that not only do we see the full extent of Sans' powers, but we also get a lot more story information regarding his past. Sans can dodge exceptionally well. While every monster you fight in the game remains in place, Sans is able to sidestep all of your attacks at his leisure. This one ability only inhabits a massive list of world-breaking, fourth-wall-defying powers that he has. These powers include, but are probably not limited to, traveling to areas from other areas that are not continuous, meaning that he can transport himself and others to other places in the blink of an eye, stopping time or perhaps even slowing down time to the point where he can have private conversations with people, the ability to inflict his will onto a human soul, and gravity manipulation, just to name a few. All of these abilities make Sans a very challenging boss fight. These abilities are amazing, but the crazy bits of dialogue spoken in this fight actually give us proper reasoning for having these powers. He starts talking about our reports, how there was an anomaly in the space-time continuum. Something was causing timelines to start and stop, and eventually timelines began to disappear altogether. Sans has finally come to the conclusion that the entity he is dealing with is the cause of this, and he is next. Throughout the fight, Sans talks about his plight. He alludes to the existence of multiple timelines, and the potential resetting of those timelines. To be an actor playing out the same performance again and again, unable to change your fate or those around you, has caused Sans to become very jaded. Sans has more than likely seen everything. He has seen the end of all things, and he has seen the liberation of all monster kind. And most of all, he has the knowledge that none of it even matters. It doesn't matter if he makes it home or if he makes it to the surface. This world will be reset eventually. It's only a matter of time. Time itself is a curious thing because it's all connected to how a person perceives it. Sans perceives time and space at a level that is far beyond anyone else. This understanding and ability to manipulate time in some way gives him several advantages, but it also is the source of his loneliness. He has this knowledge, this secret that he can't share with other people. If he ever did share this secret with anyone, this would more than likely shatter their entire perspective on reality. Sans has many jobs, and the only way he can maintain them is because of these time powers. He has already given up trying to make it home, so he does what he can to keep himself busy. Imagine being placed into a play, and no matter what you said or did, the play would end the exact same way. Sure, you could try to cheat the system, use your powers to try to change things, but he can't. I'm sure he's already tried in the past, and it did not work. Lost in this endless recurring performance, the only action Sans can take is to just exist. He takes on all of these jobs to keep himself busy, stop him from thinking about the ultimate tragedy that has befallen him. Most of these jobs are just distractions for Sans. The only job he cares about is keeping the humans safe, as this job was the direct result of a promise that he made to Toriel. The Sans fight is filled with many complex attack patterns, but what really makes the fight interesting is the Sans fight specific effects that can take place. The first effect which Sans incorporates is called the blink attack. Blink and you'll miss it. The screen goes black for a brief moment, and the attack that was previously shown switches to an entirely different one. Yes, this blink mechanic makes the fight unfair in respects to giving you barely any time to react, but it also is identical to how Sans teleports away in Snowden. What is happening here? From a tactical perspective, Sans is trying to disorientate you. Despite what you are now, you are still using a human body to fight him, and this human body has senses which Sans can use against you. Depriving you of sight can make your brain pause. It is a break in the flow of information, and it can throw you off, making you easier to hit. When you get hit, Sans' attacks have an abnormal effect on them called karma. His attacks are the only attacks in the entire game that carry this effect. Getting hit will deal 1 damage to you, however, it will also afflict you with 5 points of karma. Essentially, getting hit by Sans once will deal 6 damage overall, just over a period of time rather than all at once. This attack is a type of poison damage, something that doesn't kill you immediately, but it will kill you if you don't pay attention to it. It is also something that compounds the more times you get hit. With the name Karma, I think it is very clear that this entire attack is designed to punish you. Within a Genocide Route, Sans has now taken on the role of judge, jury, and executioner. While his physical attacks do not deal heavy damage, they will do more damage the more you are hit by them. Even when fighting Sans, you are still being held accountable for your mistakes. One of the last attacks unique to Sans is his Gaster Blasters, as named in the game files. So let's talk about the implications of Sans using these things. They come out of nowhere during his fight, literally, and they appear to be numerous. These weapons share the same name with W.D. Gaster, the previous royal scientist. This would imply that Sans has knowledge of Gaster or the work that Gaster completed. The fact that Sans is using these weapons does not necessarily demand that he is directly connected with Gaster, but more so rather that he has knowledge of their existence. Because of this, and Sans' habit of collecting information, if he had proper timing, he could use his time powers and his knowledge of past saves to gain knowledge or access to restricted areas. This includes the True Lab. There is actually precedent for Sans potentially working with Dr. Alphys in the past. Sans does have somewhat of a secret lab behind his house. Sans continues his dialogue as the fight goes on. Sans is aware of the inevitable reset. He knows that this fight is futile, and at this point, Sans is not playing to win. He's playing to try to get the human to quit. The reset in general is the reasoning he gives for his complacency. He knows that no matter how hard he tries, no matter what he does, it will all eventually be reset, and his effort would be for nothing. This complacency doesn't matter anymore. This is quite possibly the most extreme case of do or die. So extreme that if Sans continues to do nothing, he won't just die, he will be completely erased. Feeling the pressure, Sans offers you an armistice. Sans is sparing you. If you say yes, being under the impression that this is the very last time the game gives you a chance at redemption, Sans will straight up kill you. He will even make fun of you when you respawn to try to fight him again. Now, you could easily chalk this up as an intermission to the fight, or just one last middle finger from Sans. I would argue it's a little bit more complicated than that. At this point, everyone is dead. Papyrus, Toriel, and everyone else who Sans cares about, they're all gone. There is no peaceful resolution to this. Knowing this, why all the trolling? Simple. Sans does not want you to surrender. He doesn't want you to fess up and atone for your sins. Sans wants you angry. The angrier you are, the more mistakes you make. The more mistakes you make, the angrier you get, and so on. Eventually, you will just rage quit the game, and that is exactly what Sans wants. This is only the first of many examples where Sans will display his psychological prowess. If you say no to this armistice, then Sans will really start to go all out. At a certain point, he will begin to attack you even when it's not his turn, inside the very menus itself. Attacks will be thrown out as you move through your menus, making even using items a danger. Sans is now bending the rules in his favor just to make you quit. If you manage to make it past all of Sans' rule-breaking attacks, he will then show you his special attack, which is nothing. Literally nothing. Sans will now stay here and take his turn infinitely until the end of time. Sans has now given up trying to convince you with his words, and decides to show you how powerful inaction can be. But Sans is tired. The fight has worn him out. Eventually he falls asleep, and it is now your turn to break the rules. By moving to the left, you can now move the combat box over to the fight button in order to activate it. Pressing it will attack, but Sans was able to dodge it once again. He takes the time to gloat over this dodge, but unfortunately for him, you were still on the fight button. Sans has been defeated, and a red liquid begins to drain out of his wound and his mouth. Sans' blood, seen within the Genocide Route before he dies, is a very contentious topic. Blood is in quotation marks because this is a complete impossibility. Monsters in Undertale are made of magic and cannot bleed. This inconsistency has made people speculate that Sans is in fact human, with the power of determination and everything. And this is the source of all of his time-bending powers. The idea of Sans bleeding would change everything we know about him on a fundamental level. For starters, it might actually mean that Papyrus and Sans are not actually brothers. Papyrus doesn't bleed at all, even when you take off his entire head. Why would Sans bleed when Papyrus doesn't? Inconsistency aside, Sans possessing determination and being a human would make too much sense. Sans and Papyrus are known to be outsiders, even in the world of monsters. The monsters have been trapped in the underground for quite some time, so even with people being reserved to their own places, I think everyone pretty much knows each other at this point. You don't see other monsters pop out of nowhere because no one can leave, and presumably only few can enter in certain places. I would also like to point out that when it comes to the Skelebros, they are about as close to humans as any monster can get. I know for a fact those aren't dolphin skeletons, so what exactly sets them apart from being human and being a skeleton? Perhaps at one point Sans and Papyrus were human, and when they died their skeletons were somehow preserved and were able to linger on after death thanks to their determination. This would be supported by Sans and Papyrus being able to identify you as human when most other monsters cannot. To be fair, it does take Papyrus a little while to identify you as human, but Sans does it immediately. Now, let's tackle the argument that this is not blood, this is actually ketchup. If this was a bottle of ketchup, this would mean that Sans always carries around one with him. While this is not impossible, it is highly improbable. Why would he have a bottle with him if he was going to fight this demonic horror that will shatter his timeline if he fails? It's not like he's going to need it. I would also like to point out that gravity is not situational. If Sans was struck with such a force that would break the bottle, the redness would not have spread through his wound and his mouth. Instead, you would have seen the red liquid float down his legs onto the floor. The absolute best piece of evidence that supports that this is ketchup would be that the red color of Sans' wound shares the same color as the ketchup he drinks in the Grillby's cutscene. Sans stands up from the ground and admits defeat. He says he's going to Grillby's, and before he disappears, he asks Papyrus if he wants anything. A tragic end to a character whose life was already filled with tragedy. Sans' death does not count as your actual kill count. This detail, combined with Sans making his way to Grillby's, has led many people to speculate that this version of Sans somehow survived. We will periodically return to the Genocide Run to talk about things like parallels and differences, but the real meat of Sans' character can be found within the neutral/pacifist routes. Let's start out with Sans' introduction. This moment is very iconic when it comes to Undertale. Whenever people talk about Sans as a character, this moment sums him up very well. Scary and funny at the exact same time. It almost doesn't make sense, but we'll get into that. Right after you finish your business in the ruins, depending on what happened, a new player could be in a very emotionally compromised place. Toriel was a strong and compelling character, and there is a good chance that, to your knowledge, that was the last time you will ever see her. The game doesn't really give you a lot of time to process this because right after you leave the ruins, the tone becomes very foreboding. If there's anyone that knows what this sound is that plays as soon as you leave the ruins, if you could tell me, that'd be great. My best guess is it's some kind of binaural beat set to a frequency used to instill a sense of fear in the player. This would not have been required as the idea of being stalked by a short, faceless figure fits the bill already. Sans decides to make himself known before you pass through this wooden gateway. He demands to shake your hand, and you have no choice but to oblige. Moments later, the tone is then shattered through the sound of a whoopee cushion. My only question is, why? Why the theatrics? From a meta standpoint, I know that this could be chalked up to Toby's storytelling strategy. I mean, fear and comedy are two emotions that people respond to the most. Having a character take advantage of both of these emotions could make their introduction more memorable. The only thing I'm really stuck on is, why does Sans the character do this? He made a promise to protect the human for Toriel, so why is he starting off this conversation in the most intimidating way possible? I pondered this for a moment, and then I remembered all of the times I equated Sans to an actor in a play. In a way, this is theatrics. This is a way to greet someone that invokes an emotional response. Also, this intimidating facade is what makes the whoopee cushion joke land as good as it does. Being a comedian, I would imagine that a joke landing is a little bit more important to Sans than whether somebody likes them or not. If Sans were to just walk up to the human and ask them to turn around and shake hands, then they probably would have noticed the whoopee cushion immediately. Then the joke would have been ruined. From the human's perspective, fear is probably what made them grip the whoopee cushion with such force. The more I think about this moment, the more I realize it is such an uncanny display in the understanding of psychological responses that I would go as far as to say that Sans is a psychological savant. I believe that Sans has profound knowledge of events that are yet to play out, but also he has the intelligence to use this knowledge to invoke the reaction he wants. So he uses his understanding to mess with people, and his older brother Papyrus is one of his biggest victims. Which brings us to our next Sans moment. The conveniently shaped lamp is one of the many hijinks that Sans pulls in Snowden. Not only is this scene good fun, but it actually clues us into Sans' abilities and his personality. To help the human evade his human capturing brother, Sans tells the player to walk behind this lamp, which is in the exact same shape as the human's body. The flavor text tries to identify this object as just a conveniently shaped lamp, but I would not settle for just that. I am 100% certain that Sans is the one who put this lamp here. Sans snarkishly alludes to this lamp beckoning Papyrus closer, even though he is fully aware that Papyrus would not be interested. This comedy act tells us a lot of things. For starters, it heavily hints that Sans has a profound foreknowledge of events which transpire, and it also supports what I said earlier regarding Sans being a savant when it comes to social interactions. A lot of his understanding comes from his knowledge of the timeline, but it takes a lot more than situational knowledge to understand exactly how someone would react in this instance. I have no doubt that Sans has an advantage when it comes to determining Papyrus's emotions considering their kinship. Above all, the most fourth wall breaking thing Sans does in this scene is turning directly towards the camera after he makes his jokes. This isn't the only instance of a character from this series turning to look at us, but I am certain that this is the first. This would not only give us an inclination that Sans is aware of the player's presence, but also potentially has control over game systems like the camera. This is only further supported by the Genocide Route fight when he is able to take his turn infinitely. Speaking of genocide, if you are playing as such, not only does Frisk not listen to Sans and not hide behind the lamp, but Papyrus doesn't even recognize them as human. This further informs Sans about your genocidal nature. All in all, this is a fantastic opening scene for the Skelebros, and it is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Sans' shenanigans. Moving south from this ice-sliding tunnel thing, and you will find Sans waiting for you. Walking across to the other side, and you will find Sans waiting for you. The initial implication is that Sans can teleport, and if you are playing a genocide route, this is strongly reinforced by the fact that he teleports away after telling you you are going to have a bad time. However, I think that we aren't thinking in fourth dimensions. In a bit, Sans will be seen stopping time completely, but considering he is still talking while he does it, I think it's safe to say that Sans is not teleporting in this instance. He is simply waiting for you to turn your back, stopping time, and walking over to the other side. For us, it's seamless, but for Sans, it's a fun distraction, as well as finding himself in places before you get there. It would appear that on several occasions the game is trying to imply that Sans is lazy. Papyrus calls Sans lazy, Undyne gets upset when she sees that Sans is sleeping. He even speaks in lowercase letters most of the time. Everything we are shown regarding Sans would imply that he is a lazy, untrustworthy worker who only acts when the literal world itself is in jeopardy. I have to admit, for a while, I thought Sans was pretty lazy too. I now understand that the reason why he appears to be so lazy and the reason why we see him sleeping is because he's tired from holding down several jobs. Honestly, it makes a lot more sense now. If Sans really was lazy, then he would only have one job and he would sleep the days away. But in fact, he has several jobs, including one of the most important ones. Sans has willingly taken it upon himself to complete all of these tasks. He could easily just spend his time messing with people to entertain himself. And while he does do this, a lot of his efforts probably free up a lot of hands within the underground. A lot of Sans' jobs on paper are very boring. Most of his jobs require sitting and waiting for long periods of time. We have already talked about how Sans is a very intelligent person. Several details such as the quantum physics book inside Sans' house, and other things that we will talk about later would imply that Sans has an acute knowledge of quantum physics. Quantum physics is the study of how matter works at the atomic level. This branch of physics is mostly theoretical, but if it were plausible, it would mean that every single time you touch an object, you have the chance to pass right through it. This is where the concept of quantum tunneling comes from. If Sans had a profound knowledge of quantum physics, he could use this knowledge to bend the rules of nature to better suit him. This idea is interesting and somewhat viable, but then why would Sans not have the ability to let all of the monsters in the underground escape? Perhaps he tried to do that, but he could not replicate it on a massive level. There is also a more meta possibility that falls in line with Sans' ability to utilize gameplay mechanics to benefit himself. Turning towards the camera while it zooms in on him, stopping the player from taking their turn, being able to track how many times Sans has killed the player, would all point to Sans knowing that he lives within a video game world. If he was able to discover this, then after some time he could very well learn about the game's systems and failings of those systems. This includes glitches. Perhaps when Sans states that these pathways are shortcuts, maybe he isn't actually lying. Maybe he is simply walking through the load zone in such a way that it will lead him to a different place. The way that load zones work is not as continuous as you might think. Technically, any load zone can be altered to take you anywhere in the game. If you wanted, you could change the game files and find yourself in the Judgement Hall after you go through the door to the shop in Snowdin. There is always a chance that the load zone could be bugged by a certain action, and Sans is using his game knowledge to get the Grillbys much faster. The Grillby conversation is optional, but wow, is this conversation filled with layers. The way I see it, the best way to break this down is to briefly recount the events, then analyze these events twice. Why am I analyzing everything twice? Well, you'll see. Right before you enter Waterfall proper, you have the ability to have a chat with Sans. Agreeing to his invitation will then allow him to guide you to the right until you arrive at Grillby's. Geographically speaking, Grillby should be located back where you came, to the left. This is a blatant break in continuity. But I think we have talked about Sans and his magic time teleportation nonsense enough. The only thing to glean from this is the fact that his powers can affect others, and they work so seamlessly that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless the two places in question were insanely different. Which they are. Sans is welcomed by everyone in the restaurant. Most of the greetings are filled with praise, while one monster in particular explains that Sans was just there. He plays off this accusation with a joke and then beckons you to sit at the bar. He then tricks you again with the same whoopee cushion prank, which he also plays off. When talking to Sans at the bar, you have multiple branching paths of dialogue. Luckily for me, there is only one option that matters, and truly, it's not even an option at all. Right before Sans asks you this question, the light dims. Considering the flames that make up Grillby's head are frozen in place, it is very safe to say that Sans has stopped time completely to ask you this question. His question is regarding a certain talking flower. Answering yes or no will only have a slight difference on dialogue, as Sans explains the echo flower regardless of what you say. The echo flower is a funny little plant that repeats the last word which was spoken by someone nearby, presumably through magic. There is actually an echo flower directly located next to Sans right when he invites you to Grillby's. And there is even a handy monster sitting right next to the plant who will explain the flower to you if you talk to him. Sans goes on to explain that Papyrus has been talking to a supposed echo flower, and this flower has been giving him things like praise and advice. Sans simply requests that you keep an eye out for it and take care. When Sans catechizes you, the text for talking flower is yellow. To be fair, this is a slightly different yellow than the yellow that Flowey is. Flowey is #FF200, and this dialogue is actually #F00. So technically the text and Flowey are different shades of yellow. I personally think the slight difference in color is irrelevant because from the player's perspective, the fact that the text is yellow is a direct signal to remind you of Flowey's existence. Considering Sans has been known to change the color of his dialogue before, this leads me to believe that Sans is doing this intentionally to garner a reaction from Frisk. Much earlier within the ruins there is a frogget you can meet which somehow has the power to tell everyone in the underground to change their colored text. So it's safe to say that colored text is something that monsters are canonically aware of. Sans even makes an effort to course correct by displaying Echo Flower in blue text. Now you can probably see why I have to analyze this scene 2 times. I am inclined to believe that Sans knows all about the yellow flower, but there is still a very real chance that he is being genuine and he truly doesn't know. So in essence, I will analyze this conversation under the assumption that Sans is genuine, and then when Sans is not genuine. If Sans is being genuine, then it is clear that he has little to no knowledge of Flowey. This is mainly due to the fact that they are so new to Snowdin in general. The shopkeeper in Snowdon says as much. Considering Sans' several jobs and stations, I think it is safe to say that he has eyes everywhere. Even so, it is not impossible for Flowey to avoid his detection. An independent, potentially malicious actor giving his brother strange ideas and information would be very concerning for Sans. Papyrus is well known to be more of an emotional person than an analytical one, so it could be very easy for someone to mislead him if the correct words were spoken. Sans fears that his brother is being misled by this independent actor and is asking the human for help to discern who this is. He has come to the conclusion that this person is simply using an echo flower to manipulate Papyrus rather than the flower itself. This conclusion from Sans' perspective is sound, considering Flowey is the first of his kind. Ultimately, this scene is used to further emphasize Sans' presence within the underground and how he interacts with those within. Look at how everyone loves Sans. They all give him praise as soon as he walks in. Sans has not garnered this popularity for the sake of his ego. He has earned people's trust and admiration to better his position in the underground. Just look at that mailbox. I am sure there are some unread Smash Brothers letters in there, but I am even more certain that these letters are from Sans' many admirers throughout the underground. Sans is a networking genius thanks to his high emotional intelligence, and this scene is purely par for the course for him. The human is a very powerful individual, and Sans understands this, so he uses his networking prowess to get the support of the human. Because if you can't kill them, you recruit them. For the sake of transparency, I should mention that I believe Sans is absolutely not being genuine in this scene. That being said, this portion of the analysis will include my reasoning for why Sans is playing coy. For starters, I'll follow up with the argument concerning the colored text. The color of text is typically used for keying players into certain concepts. Sans in fact does this for the 2 blue attacks that can be found in monster battles. One could argue that the text is used the same way as most RPGs use it, as previously mentioned. But this is Undertale. This game is notorious for laughing in the face of such tropes. Not only is there a frogget that directly references the fact that spare text turns yellow when monsters can be spared, but they also offer to change it to pink. This implies that a monster's colored text is something they directly have knowledge of and control over, albeit with a little bit of effort from them on their part. This includes Sans, so therefore I am confident when I say that Sans has changed his text to purposefully key us in to his knowledge of Flowey. Why does Sans do this? The exact same reason he stops and says he had something to tell us, but he forgot. He has no idea what the true capability of this yellow talking flower is, and he has no idea if it has the capacity to listen to their conversation. So Sans uses his abilities to stop time for good measure. If there was an evil yellow flower listening to them, they would have received as little information as possible. This is Sans gathering information. We may not know what his intentions are, but that doesn't matter to him because he received everything he needed from this conversation. Ultimately, his goal was to gauge the human's awareness of the yellow flower to see if they knew about it. What does Sans do with this information? Supposedly, nothing. As far as we know, he does not try to stop Flowey before he can absorb the souls, which is strange, because it's not like he's far away. We literally see him in the Judgement Hall right before we meet Asgore. The only explanation I could muster is that Sans did not know of Flowey's ability to burrow underground. Flowey could have simply transferred himself underground while traveling right underneath Sans' non-existent nose. And that patch of flowers is perfect camouflage for Flowey. Let's move on to the Mettaton Resort. The Mettaton Resort will lead you to the core, one of the last obstacles on your journey to the castle. Right before you enter, Sans is waiting outside and offers to take you out for dinner. Quick side note, the fact that Sans had the foresight to book a table so far in advance at this very moment, knowing the human would be here, is just one more log on the pile of evidence that confirms Sans and his time-traveling ways. Where before Sans was chewing your ear for information, now he is trying to convince you to not continue your journey. Sans is advocating for compromise. He explains how the human technically has everything they need: food, drink, and people to look out for them. He does not push the issue any further and instead decides to tell you a story. Sans would often travel to the locked door in Snowdon and practice his knock-knock jokes, until one day Toriel found him and began to join in and make her own. I have to say, if I was knocking on a door for a while and suddenly heard a knock back, that would make me feel a little uneasy, but Sans never mentions being surprised whatsoever. The natural understanding of this is that Sans was aware of this meeting, and what appears to be a random meeting is perpetuated because Sans enjoys Toriel's company. Sans and Toriel are able to share in this camaraderie, but one day Toriel was noticeably upset. The exact time frame of this story is unclear. The only thing we know for sure is that it happened before Frisk had entered the underground. As the story is told, Toriel requests that if Sans ever comes across a human, that he would help them, which he agreed. Sans begins to talk ominously soon after. He explains the weight of the promise he made to Toriel, and he blatantly explains that if that promise was not made, this very conversation would have never happened. Sans would have killed the human without giving it a second thought. This moment is almost the exact opposite of the initial meeting with Sans. First, he takes us to a nice place to talk, then he tells us a sweet, charming story about how he met Toriel. This results in us letting our guard down, and then he ends the story stating that he would have killed you if he didn't make that promise to Toriel. He tries to reassure you after, saying that he was simply joking, but like previously stated, Sans is a lot more intelligent than that. Why would Sans do all this? What is the point of telling the human that they would be dead if Toriel didn't care for them? Truly, I can't say for sure. This is more than likely the most complex Sans scene in the entire game. Maybe the most complex scene in the game in general. There are several interpretations I can discern from this story. Maybe Sans is trying to convince the human to quit. He does this by explaining that the human would have never made it to Snowdon if not for him. Maybe Sans is trying to say that even though the human wasn't born here, there are still people here who care about them, and they should appreciate that. Heck, maybe Sans is just screwing with the human, like he has done several times before. I honestly do not know for sure. What I do know for sure is that Sans and Toriel get along very well. These two characters began to bond over their favorite type of joke. These conversations led to other, deeper conversations between the two. How the promise was made does not really concern me, but rather Sans' reluctance to make promises. Sans is an incredibly strong individual. He is arguably one of the strongest monsters in the underground, and he can accomplish certain tasks with a lot less effort thanks to his time travel teleportation nonsense. Performing tasks and carrying out favors for people under a promise would not be as difficult for him compared to someone else. There is no physical reason why Sans cannot make promises, but rather emotional ones. A promise is a declaration, an assurance that a certain task will be completed or a particular thing will happen. The reason why Sans typically refuses to make promises is because he knows exactly what can happen and what cannot happen. For example, if someone wanted Sans to make a promise that he would bring them an alligator for Christmas for whatever reason, Sans would say no, because 1, that's a ridiculous request, but 2, most of all, there is never an alligator seen within the underground, and it cannot be done. Toriel's promise is a different story. Sans states that anyone who shares his affinity for bad puns is too honest for Sans to refuse. Sans values the fact that Toriel cares so little for her image that she openly enjoys a form of comedy that is, and in and of itself, a joke. Sans loves puns, but even when he talks about them, he says that they are terrible. But Toriel, she enjoys them with none of the attached sarcasm. This is every Sans Judgement. The Sans Judgement scene is very versatile. The dialogue which follows is a direct result of your actions. There are 3 main types of judgments which Sans can carry out. The first and most basic is the basic pacifist judgment where you have 0 EXP. Sans congratulates you over the fact that you have shown restraint in this terrible situation. Every monster that has attacked you has either been spared or circumnavigated. The second type comes from a neutral run, and it has several variations. A basic neutral run is typically seen on your first playthrough. If you have killed any monsters during your time here, Sans doesn't necessarily judge you as much as he tells you to judge yourself. Practicing introspection is a fantastic way to better oneself, and it makes sense that this would be the end result of a neutral ending. This game has a reputation for being the RPG where no one has to die. Despite this, the game strives to be fair to new players. It's not until you live through this moment and try to influence Sans' judgment do things get interesting. Still, technically within a neutral playthrough, if you ever make the decision to kill monsters, Sans will take notice over how much EXP you have acquired, all the way down to a single monster. The dialogue is based on your love value. Sans gives a different response based on how many people you killed, starting from 1, then 2, then 3, then a range from levels 4 to 9, another range from levels 10 to 14, and the final one is if you are level 15 or higher. What's intriguing about the judgments is that you would expect Sans to judge evenly for the low numbers and progressively get more stern. In reality, he is a little bit more judgmental at times even if you have a small level value. Almost as if he is completely aware that the only way you would be able to reach this value is if you did it intentionally. To be fair, he has a point. Picking a single random monster to kill just to see what Sans says is a step above just morbid curiosity, and it's a level of ugliness that Sans will judge you for. The same goes for just arriving at level 2. Sans is completely unresponsive to the idea that someone could have reached level 2 on accident, so he still criticizes you. Funnily, level 3 is supposedly the magic number, as he doesn't think to judge you as harshly as the previous level values. From here, Sans' judgment will become a lot more stern. From here, Sans continues to judge you more harshly depending on your level with increasing intensity. This is all good fun, but how the heck does Sans know how many people you've killed? How is it that Sans has the ability to judge a person based on their LV? Is there some kind of big number over the human's head that the player cannot see? Was Sans keeping tally like a weirdo behind the bushes? After everything we have talked about previously, and the fact that now we know he can sense level values, I am beyond convinced that Sans has the profound knowledge that he is living within a video game. The time powers, knowledge of game events, knowledge of things like LV and EXP, directly referencing gameplay mechanics. This ability to judge those based on how many people they have killed is just par for the course at this point, and I think he is just fulfilling his role as the arbiter. Say what you will regarding Sans' judgments, but he is a monster of his word. Even if you murder Papyrus, he will not fight you unless you're intended on destroying everything. If you do kill Papyrus, Sans will then ask you a question. A simple question in which he asks you if you think you did the right thing, and also if you think your previous knowledge of this world gives you an obligation to do the right thing. It doesn't really matter what you answer. You have already killed Papyrus, and Sans lets you know exactly what he thinks about you and your brother killing self. The third and final judgment type is not really a judgment as much as it is a punishment. Sans has seen this one before, and he doesn't like how this episode ends, so he is now playing the role of judge, jury, and executioner. Technically, there isn't really a judgment that takes place. Sans simply gives you an ultimatum that you will stop moving or you will die. Every single death to Sans is kept track of. He pretends that it is your expression that tips him off, but I think we are past the facade at this point. The gloves are off, Sans has made the decision to kill you, and he is doing everything he can to ensure his victory. However, there is a level of nuance to this fight that Sans understands, but is not directly conveyed to the audience. Sans is now aware that he is fighting a potentially immortal opponent who will hit him eventually. Knowing this, Sans does go at the human with everything he has, not to kill them, but to make them so upset that they will eventually give up. Sans alludes to you giving up several times throughout the fight, even using his own life experience as reasoning. This is very abstract compared to the goals of every other monster you have faced, which alludes even more to the idea that Sans is aware that this is all just a game. His goal is to not beat the opponent in front of him, but rather the one who is really in control, at least at this moment. The person behind the screen. If they finally give up and reset the game, then Sans will win. The only way for Sans to win the game is when the player stops playing. It really puts a lot of his choices and trolls into perspective, doesn't it? Do you think this is why Sans trolls the player so many times? Sheer boredom and tragedy are fine reasons why someone like Sans could carry out so many practical jokes, but the player specifically gets the brunt of them the most. Perhaps the reason why Sans plays so many practical jokes on the player is that they are trying to get the player to rage quit. Then he can finally go back to his life, without fear of being genocided. In another timeline, Sans and the human could have been friends, and also in another timeline, Sans' trust can be earned, and he will finally divulge his secrets. Playing through Undertale a second time, in what I call a time traveler's run, several of the main characters will vaguely remember you and how you used to be friends. This is essentially a pacifist run where you reset after beating Flowey for the first time. The boss monsters vaguely recognize you and remember being friends. This is a fun Easter egg, but pales in comparison to what Sans has in store for you when you make it back to the Judgement Hall. Sans stops his usual spiel and realizes that you already know what he is going to say. He then gives you a super secret time traveler passcode, and then he gives you the secret passphrase. After this, he will give you the supposed final key to his room. Inside, you will find a treadmill that supposedly can be walked on sideways, and a note attached. You realize it is a treadmill when Papyrus walks in and questions you about his action figure collection. Papyrus immediately realizes that Sans is pranking you across time and space, even referencing a moment where he fell for the same pranks. The note attached to the treadmill reads, "The truth is, you got owned." This is actually a first for Sans, as this is one of the only times in a non-genocide route that he openly mocks you for falling for one of his tricks. There also appears to be some level of vitriol behind this note, almost as if Sans wants to twist the knife a little bit more and punish you for wanting answers. This, like so many times before, is a massive troll. Until it wasn't. Looking inside Sans' dresser, you will find a silver key. This is the key to the secret room behind Sans and Papyrus' house. Within this room lies the final piece of the puzzle. When you are in this back room, the exact same song from the resort plays. Hold that thought for a moment. Inside the first drawer is an assortment of pictures. These pictures are comprised of several strangers and Sans. I'm not sure if this is a lack of foresight from Toby or a very intentional hint, but this photo album, as described, has several pictures of people that the player does not recognize. And I don't know about you, but I feel like Papyrus would be pretty recognizable to the player. To think that Sans would not have at least one photo of him and his brother in this album is baffling. The only explanation for this would be that Sans keeps his brother's photos closer. In his room, perhaps. Or, even more likely, the people seen in these pictures are from parts of Sans' life that didn't directly involve Papyrus whatsoever. Within the second drawer is a badge of unknown origin. Badges are typically used to identify some form of law enforcement. However, this is not always the case. A badge can mean a lot of things. Membership to an organization, a memento for a specific accomplishment, or even a position of authority. All of these things could mean that Sans actually comes from a well-respected position in an organization of people. Moving on to the third and fourth drawer, we find a series of blueprints. These blueprints are ineligible, mostly because of the mentioned bad handwriting in the flavor text. The initial thought would have been that Sans himself wrote out these blueprints, but we are able to read the note that Sans left behind just fine, so these blueprints cannot be his. This doesn't give us information as much as it is a setup for what awaits us at the end of the room. At the far side of the room, there is a strange machine. The flavor text is from the player's perspective, so we get little viable information aside from the machine underneath being noticeably broken. I think we've seen enough. Remember the music that plays during the resort conversation? This is what Sans gave up on. This is what he was trying to accomplish. These pictures are from Sans' home, his original home where he probably lived with Papyrus, until one day something happened and both of them were lost across time and space. Sans doesn't think to bother Papyrus with the fixing of the machine because he probably wasn't involved with making it, hence the lack of Papyrus in the pictures. The strange machine blueprints, talking about timelines disappearing, pictures of Sans hanging out with people who are not connected to Papyrus, ownership of a badge that evokes a position of responsibility or authority, incredible levels of foresight to events which have yet to happen, noticeably aware of things that happened in other timelines. All of these things point to one logical conclusion. Sans, I know you're a time traveler. Sans? Sans! I know that you're a time traveler. No, that's not the secret. The secret is you're actually a character in a video game, and every single playthrough of that game is a different version of you. Wait, you knew all of this and you're just okay with it? Doesn't it change your entire life perspective that even with all of your profound time travel powers, you're just a video game character and your happiness or suffering is determined by the people who play your game? Ow. Yeah, I guess so. Still pretty tragic you won't ever get to go home, though. What? Oh no, I'm a YouTuber making a video about this game. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I try to put my own spin on things, but it depends on the video. Anywhere from like 35 minutes to an hour. I have no idea. I just say stuff and people seem to listen. What? Oh, the hat. No, this is my disguise. Yeah, you see, I wear human clothes, so no one figures out I'm actually a bird. It helps me blend in. Yeah, I guess. Oh, I got an idea. Maybe I can go tell your genocide variant to drink a couple of energy drinks before his fight. Huh, so that's what that looks like. Did somebody draw doo-doo bird on my wing? What the heck? God damn it, Sans. And now we get to the epilogue portion. This is a section of the video where I decided to put more abstract concepts rather than events which happen in-game. This section will be more speculative rather than analytical. The reality we inhabit is based on how we perceive it. Our eyes, mouth, nose, and other extremities are designed to interact with the world around us and take in information. I honestly cannot begin to know how monster biology works considering they are made of magic and not blood. So I honestly don't know if monsters share the inherent human drive to seek out information. What I do know is that Sans does have this drive to seek out information. From a human perspective, being wrapped in a looping artificial world would make anyone crazy after enough time. Time is relative, of course, but time is something experienced very differently for Sans. If Sans shared in the human characteristic of constantly seeking knowledge, then this constantly looping narrative would lead to his psyche breaking down. Humans constantly crave new information. Any break in information makes the brain begin to glitch, for lack of a better word. This is actually seen in people who have been in solitary confinement for long periods of time. The world of Undertale is a far cry from a solitary chamber, but after extended exposure to this looping narrative, I am confident a similar effect would take place. People need new information constantly rolling in because of our brains and how they evolved to obtain and digest previously mentioned information. Sans is a monster who presumably does not have a brain like we do, so he may be less reliant on outside stimulus to remain sane. At worst, this endless looping narrative would make Sans bored beyond imagination, and eventually lead him to do something, anything to get entertainment. The actual nature of the world of Undertale is unclear. It is a world of multiple branching timelines, resetting events that transpire, different random events which could happen and also cannot happen, And while all of this is entertaining, it is hard to get a consistent narrative out of it. Multiverse time travel stories are not impossible, but I honestly believe that any introduction of such is the narrative equivalent of shooting oneself in the foot. Typically, stories have a narrative beginning, middle, and end. However, the story of Undertale does not stop with a single playthrough. As mentioned previously, there are changes to the game depending on whether this is your first or second playthrough. For you, the story is continuing to develop, but you are narratively winding back the clock all the way to the beginning of your journey. While several of the boss monsters reference meeting you before, Sans especially has knowledge of previous saves and events. Any deviation in the turn of these events is something he should jump at because this is new information. However, this understanding of Sans is not solid. If Sans is intrigued by new information in the form of the player playing through events of the game, then why would Sans use these new events as a means to troll the player? It is a mystery that I honestly could not begin to solve, because with all of its clever tricks, this is still just a video game with set responses from its characters, Sans included. Without ever having the ability to directly question Sans and the guarantee of getting actual answers from Sans, I doubt we will ever get the full answers we want. So we are simply left with this pure speculative idea of what it is like to live within a video game. There is actually a really interesting conversation to be had about the psychology of monsters in general. Monsters feel emotions like humans, but they seem to be lacking in determination. Most of them anyway. Determination is a very real thing in this world. However, it also carries emotional connotations. Determination, the drive to linger on, the firmness of purpose. To be without, I don't know how any monster could have a sense of purpose. And then we have anomalous instances like Undyne, being all but confirmed to be filled with determination. However, this was only after being faced with the event of her death and the possible extinction of her race. The human soul is what gives them their determination, and the magnitude of this power seems to be situational. For example, in the final confrontation with Azrael, our determination is so great we can evade death, and use it to heal ourselves. So, knowing this, I wonder if Undyne and perhaps the other boss monsters such as Sans do possess determination, and they simply need to exert themselves to use it. Perhaps they do possess determination, if not at a very small level, and the only way to bring it out is to be met with seemingly impossible circumstances, but have a genuine reason to continue living. This entire video was trying to analyze Sans at a fundamental level, but in all honesty, I don't think there is a way I could break down Sans this way, with any degree of accuracy. Just earlier, I had to make several assumptions about how Sans' mind works exactly like a human's, but the truth is his mind probably doesn't work like a human's. He's a monster, not a human. While his personality remains, his drive to achieve is most likely gone. I think a lot of people believe Sans the Skeleton to be a nihilist. I would disagree. At least for the most part. Nihilism means you don't believe in anything. A nihilist doesn't believe in right or wrong. Nihilists don't have values, and they believe that existence itself is pointless. Another reason I don't believe that Sans has gone full nihilistic is because of his personality. He uses his knowledge of events as a sort of comedy. His life is filled with depressing moments, so he uses comedy as a coping mechanism. Laughing and comedy is actually deeply ingrained into our DNA. Several species of mammals and even some birds laugh. Ha ha ha, you see? The actual origins of laughter are not well known. Some people think it was developed during primal days, as we can see some primates laugh during adolescent play. Some people see it as a social skill developed to increase our chance of survival. I would actually agree with the latter. Sans has long past given up on going home, so this is how he copes. He sets up lamps shaped like humans to mess with Papyrus, he tells knock-knock jokes to relive the first time he met Toriel. This is all he can do with his fate, otherwise he would be crushed by sorrow. I was initially planning on making some big philosophical speech about holding on to hope and persevering despite being literally lost to time, but it doesn't feel quite right. Ultimately, Sans is a pretty simple character. There is a certain level of understanding he has regarding the world around him, and this understanding has made him see the simplicity in many things that others try to complicate. He has his brother, good food, bad jokes, and not a single grand narrative to speak of. Sure, there are more grander themes that surround him, but when it comes to the character itself, he's pretty simplistic. He doesn't have a lot of wants. Maybe there is a variant of Sans that was able to fix the machine and find his way home, but there are several variations of Sans that didn't. Maybe it's my lesser experience, or the fact that I haven't seen what he's seen, but was he right to give up? What do you all think? This has been a character analysis of Sans the Skeleton. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye. Wait a minute, I also have time travel powers for the sake of this joke, so why don't I just go back in time right before Sans was lost so I can find out what happened and what went wrong, then I can help the other versions of him get home. Great idea, Nighthawk. Thanks, Nighthawk. Stop talking to yourself, Nighthawk. Okay. Hello, excuse me, sir. Your name wouldn't happen to be Sans, would it? I knew it.